Today on the Wrestling Roundtable, the 2012 year in review for MMA and pro wrestling and Ring of Honor.
Oh, that's so baby! Oh, shit!
Welcome to the Wrestling Roundtable. I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. I worked, past tense, worked in pro wrestling over 8 years. Of course, that does not apply anymore, as I've been hinting at for the past year, whatever it was. Remember the season premiere? I said, I think the gloves are going to come off this season. Well, they finally did. It took a lot longer than I thought it would, but we'll get to that a little later on. Right now, we're doing the 2012 year in review and introducing the panel. First, to my left, which is your right, Will effin' Brooks. He's been an MMA fan for 6 years, and to my right, which is your left, the Grappling LeConte brothers. First up, Martin, who's been a fan of 7 years, mixed martial arts. How's your training going?
Pretty good, man. Just get back at it.
Gonna do any tournaments coming up?
Probably soon.
Hope so. Rodney LeConte. He's been an MMA fan, just like myself, for 17 years, and what's the latest with The Rod?
The Rod is moving, making things happen, and enjoying 2013.
Doing the 2012 year in review for mixed martial arts starting off, of course we have to go to the top promotion, Zuffa, and what a year. Not all positive, of course. We talked in detail about the injury bugs that have plagued 2012. Holy shit, we thought it couldn't get worse than 2011. It did. And to the point where they canceled their first ever event, 151, which we talked about. Now, I don't want to dwell on something we've already covered in a year in review sort of thing, but one of the big things, of course, is their expansion. Internationally, domestically, and part of that was their first calendar year on Fox, Fuel TV, which is practically the UFC channel now, FX, and of course, Big Fox. How do you think the Fox deal is panning out? Do you think it's affecting the pay-per-view business? Because buy rates were down for a lot of things, obviously not the Sun and Silva rematch or GSP's comeback against Condit sort of thing. So there are draws, but do you think it's watering down the product having so many shows, or is it a good thing?
Absolutely not, because I don't even have Fuel. But Fox, absolutely, that's basic TV. So when people see UFC and big cards and everything, that's just getting noticed to the sport.
Well, I don't get when a lot of these diehard MMA fans complain about too many shows. What? We love the product. We love the sport. We want more. And as they structure these, because it's their first year, they're still figuring out how things should go. Obviously, I think general consensus about the first Fox card with Dos Santos and Velasquez having one fight with an hour's worth of hype going 1 minute and 4 seconds was a big mistake. And we all knew that going in. Where's our Clay Guida-Benson Henderson fight, which we had to watch on either Fox Deportes or Fuel, whatever it aired on. But they're putting some of these shows on FX. Like, we're taping Sunday. On Saturday, we've got the Brazil card with Bisping and Vitor Belfort coming up. But as they're expanding, they're going to new places. Ultimate Fighter in Australia versus UK. Ultimate Fighter in Brazil. They've had their first show in China this year. They've returned to Brazil and Japan. This is really cool, and obviously maybe these are more local shows. So they're not going to sell pay-per-views, but this makes great FX-free cards. Don't you think that it works when they're expanding internationally to do it that way?
Yes and no. Like, you do run the risk of watering down your product because too much can be a bad thing. You kind of want to have more things built up. But as a fan, yes, I am enjoying the shows. I want to see more shows, but you do run the risk of watering down. There is too much of a good thing.
Unlike baseball or football and other sports that are mainstream like that, there are no seasons. This is year-round and depends on everyone's schedule and training, of course. But they've also added 2 new divisions. Flyweight 125, we saw the first champion crowned this year, and we already know who the women's bantamweight 135 champion is because Ronda Rousey carried over that lineage of her Strikeforce title and she was given the belt. I don't know why people were complaining about why they're handing her a belt. It's the same belt. It's like when they brought over the WEC guys, Dominic Cruz and Jose Aldo. It's a lineage. It's a continuation. But that fight has yet to come up. It's coming up in February. But she made lots of waves this year. Of course, her 2 Strikeforce fights, her title win in first defense, and of course all this UFC hype.
And that body issue on ESPN.
Right. So how do you think this factors into their expansion? Is it appealing to a new crowd? And is this really going to get some attention? Or do you think maybe some, in the case of the flyweights anyway, these guys look like they're in high school. We don't care about that. We want to see heavyweights and bigger guys. Is it a good addition?
I think it's a great addition for hardcore MMA fans, the flyweight division, people who look at MMA for the first time might see the flyweights as smaller guys. I've seen ESPN cover even some of the bantamweights and then making jokes, oh, this is the smaller UFC guys. This is the Diet Federation or something like that.
Like that means they can't
So
fight.
they don't get it. Yeah, they don't get how...
They don't say that about boxing, do they?
Exactly. I mean, they don't get how much quicker these guys are, the technical aspects that these guys bring, the level of technical fighting that these guys bring each and every time. As far as Ronda Rousey, I think it's a great thing for UFC. Strikeforce did a great job of promoting Gina Carano and Cyborg and Ronda Rousey. Now that you have the Zuffa marketing machine behind this talented, very marketable woman who's just a killer, and
Legit.
I will not miss another Ronda Rousey
she's an
fight.
Olympian.
Exactly. She's a legit athlete. It's not just some pretty girl that they're pushing. I think only good things could come, and she's going to bring more eyes.
Long time ago, Frank Mir made a very, very good point. Smaller guys are so good because they're great athletes. When you're his height, when you're 6'5", 250, and you're a great athlete, you're in the NFL. You're playing hockey, you're playing baseball, you're playing something else. So that's why the heavyweight division for a while wasn't good. Now it's great. Small guys, that's all they can do. They can wrestle, and they're great athletes. So they have to come to UFC. They got nothing else. The idiot Joe Schmo fan, they like to believe they're all tough. So they see a small guy, the guy's 150 pounds. Oh, I could kick the shit out of that guy.
Right.
They're not going to pay as much money to see that guy fight as if they would the 205 and 200.
Because they're larger than life. It's like the same thing with pro wrestling with the freak shows.
It's like people think, I can kick the crap out of the guy. Yeah, get in the cage. Go ahead.
And people naturally, when it comes to combat sports, like to see the bigger guys, Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. Then when you see the heavyweights,
Paradigm shift.
yeah, and boxing actually kind of helps. People are drawn to Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. The lighter guys are carrying boxing, and I think eventually, as time goes on, these smaller guys are going to be big draws.
Because we know how big Bruce Lee was physically. But you mentioned Strikeforce. Of course, last night was their final event, and they were plagued with injuries too. Several canceled shows, not a good sign. And of course, Showtime had a big factor in that too. But as we go into 2013, no more Strikeforce. Invicta got a lot of buzz on the internet last year. They seem to have some problem with the Ustream on their last iPay-per-view, but Dream seems to be on the back burner too, with one event on New Year's Eve. So Dream, Strikeforce seem to have gone away, but Bellator is going on Spike TV, so we'll see how that pans out for them in 2013, their first show coming up this week. But looking back again, not forward, but back on 2012, what do you think was event of the year? Because we mentioned a lot of these cards, there are a lot to choose from.
UFC 146, the all heavyweight pay-per-view, because it had a lot of finishes. I like to see finishes. I like to see the epic 5-round back and forth, but they get old. I like to see finishes. I like to see stoppages. I want to see guys get put down.
Winners.
Yes, winners. No second guessing. No, winners. I like to see finishes, and that's why 146 had 4 of the 5 main event fights were all finishes.
I agree. It was probably the most exciting event of the year. Even though they even canceled only one show, they made up for that maybe in the next one.
Well, the first pay-per-view of the year, which not a lot of people bought, it was an international show, but did a great crowd in Brazil, was UFC 142 from welterweight Eric Silva, pretty much breaking out. A great, I think, knockout of the year with Edson Barboza and Terry Edom. Of course, I guess you could say Pacquiao and Marquez was knockout of the year too, but this one for MMA is one of the best finishes I've ever seen. And of course, Chad Mendes and Jose Aldo in the main event with that great, I feel, star-making moment where he caught Mendes with that knee and then ran into the crowd. I thought that was a really good way to start the year. But first Fox card of the year, I wasn't a fan of it all. I think
you're not the only one.
Yeah.
But after that, they did
But
very
yeah,
well.
there were several good ones after that, and we went to the one in Izod, UFC on Fox 3, LeVar Johnson and Pat Barry, Husamar Palhares with Alan Belcher. That, to me, should have been the intro to MMA for fans, because you got weight divisions, knockout in the heavyweight fight, great groundwork in the middleweight fight, and then, of course, in the main event, Jim Miller losing to Nate Diaz in a submission. So that, to me, was more of a potpourri of MMA.
Well, the first one, that was only an hour long. The other everyone since then, it's been over 2 hours. The first one, they really only had a chance to really secure one fight. They should have put 2 fights on, but they only
Well,
they
it was more of a test run. As far as attention and making it a huge, glamorous event, UFC 148 was huge. I mean, the weigh-ins itself probably drew more than most MMA shows. With Chael Sonnen and Silva and Tito's last fight, I think that was just an event that every MMA fan had to watch, and they did a great buy. As far as fights go, I'm going to go with UFC on Fox 4. It was a pleasant surprise. All the way through, all the fights had finishes. Vera Shogun really, really surprised me, because I didn't give Vera a chance in hell. And the way he put up a fight against Shogun, very good back and forth fight, and I'm gonna give that event of the year.
We're running out of time, so real quick, what do you think was fight of the year, Martin?
Fight of the year has to be GSP and Carlos Condit.
I agree with that.
These guys were teammates coming into this fight. GSP was injured for like a whole year. He's supposed to fight
More than that, like a year and a half, and it was a unification fight too with interim
He was supposed to fight
champion.
Diaz, and then Condit beats Diaz's ass.
It looked like Condit when he hit him with that
when
kick.
he hit him. When was
That
and
scared
exactly.
me.
And the point is, when was the last time you actually seen GSP take a hit like that? A long
that's
time.
her.
A long
Well, it's
time
been a
ago.
long time since we saw him fight last
He came
too.
through though.
UFC 144, Edgar versus Bendo 1.
Japan, yeah.
5 rounds of nonstop action. Edgar likes to bitch about that kick didn't happen, I would have won. Well, fuck it, it did happen,
Right.
and you lost,
And
okay?
he kicked his ass again.
And if you would have hit you with that insecurity, you would have been knocked the hell out.
Going from the same event that named from event of the year, Joe Lazan and Jamie Varner. You talking about a great display of lightweight action. That was it. The back and forth and the great finish too, showing the great submission skills of Lazan. Fight of the year in my book.
Fighter of the year.
Anderson Silva, he's unbeatable, and he wants new challenges. Like, he just signed a couple more fights before he wants to fight GSP.
He put any arguments to rest against Charles Sonnen, and him defeating Stephan Bonner in Brazil, I think, is one of the greatest performances I've ever seen.
A special shout out to Johnny Hendricks, continually kicking everyone's ass. But I'm gonna go with someone who is now the face of a whole division, which is Ronda Rousey. You're the face of your entire sport of women's MMA. You pretty much arrived. She's ripping everybody else's arm off.
Ronda, for all the same reasons you said, became a pretty well-known female to a superstar, like an MMA superstar. And I really cannot wait to see what 2013 brings. And Cain Velasquez came into the year, had a lot of things to prove, came up with that short knockout, destroyed Bigfoot, and then destroyed JDS, which I didn't think was possible. And he just proved that, you know what, you can bounce back from anything. And it was really inspirational.
Completely dominated both guys in different ways that you didn't expect. And with Benson Henderson winning the title in Japan, then defending it against Frankie Edgar, and then defending it against Nate Diaz, I think he really solidified himself this year. But Ronda Rousey, with 2 fights, that great Maisha Tate fight and the Sarah Kaufman defense, she's a force.
And as a side note, Benson Henderson has the most MMA fight time in the year, 1 hour and 15 minutes he spent in the cage.
Well, we've spent too much time on MMA right now, so we're going to move on to pro wrestling. Coming up next, 2012 year in review for professional wrestling.
Hi, this is the American Dragon Bryan Danielson, the best wrestler in the world, and you're watching the best wrestling talk show in the world, the Wrestling Roundtable.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Follow us on Twitter, Rest Roundtable, W-R-E-S-T, Roundtable on Twitter, and you'll get tweets from me on whatever pops up into my head and updates, of course. And we're changing up the panel a little bit to my right, which is your left. Up first is Orlando O'Neill. He's been a fan of 22 years, and sitting to my right also, your left also, is Alex Payne. He's been a fan of 25 years, but you've been wrestling 7 now. We want to bring your perspective as a pro wrestler to the pro wrestling year in review topic. Now, of course, one of the major stories of the year was Jerry Lawler's heart attack during Raw. We covered that on the show, so don't want to go over that again necessarily. But the other big stories that are, I guess, less life-threatening than that were Rock and Brock coming back this year. It seems that every year they keep pushing themselves into a corner with the one show they seem to really care about. We talked about it with Triple H and Undertaker, and it's the same guys wrestling each other, Michaels before that, etc. And now they're bringing back Rock and Brock. Now, we love Rock and Brock, so of course give us more, but I think the problem is, why are these guys generally against each other? I mean, now, of course, they're mixing Cena and Punk into it, which is great, but I don't know, it just seems like, why are they depending on the past so much? Do you think this is going to come to a head at some point?
I don't think so, but I would hope that we have WrestleMania 29 coming up. And a lot of the projected matchups are Rock and Triple H again, and Rock and Cena again, and you would hope to see some mix-up to build up some of their younger stars, like Ryback. How great would it be to see Ryback versus Brock Lesnar, per se?
Right.
To try to put him over as the monster that he is.
Have Ryback beat him on his way out, because at this point, Ryback needs that extra rub to go into the rest of the year to finally get the championship.
Well, see, they've always tried having their cake and eating it too, at least in recent times. They've put the belt on Punk for over a year, which is nice on paper, but then he's not on the WrestleMania poster when it's Rock, Cena, and Brock. So what difference does it make? That says something to fans. So
how important is the World Championship if that's the case?
Well, that's another issue. There's two of them.
You remember like the lack of build-up last year going to WrestleMania with his match against Chris Jericho? They have like 5 minutes. They have like 5 minutes on Raw like every night just to try to sell the pay-per-view.
Well, think about it. In 2012, how many main event matches did CM Punk have on pay-per-views? How many pay-per-views did he close?
It took a long time for that to finally happen.
And
Why is the
John
champion
Cena
taking a back seat to a Kane-Cena ambulance match? That sort of shit. But they have introduced a lot of new faces. So we've seen Antonio Cesaro as the U.S. champion now, and Damian Sandow, and
Shield.
Right, guys like that. So that makes fans happy for a bit, but come WrestleMania time, again, it seems they go on the back burner. When is it going to get to the point where they just finally shit or get off the pot with this and push those guys into those positions? I mean, it's great that they main event a B pay-per-view like TLC.
But even then, you can say it's a B pay-per-view, but they ended the year with a big impact, especially if you go with the TLC match itself. People are still ranting and raving about it. Those guys, the Shield on Raw gets a lot of time. So it's not like they're getting backburned or anything else. If you're taking up a segment here in this hour, another segment in that hour, and then another segment in this hour, at least they're filtering you in throughout the entire product, so they're at least put some faith in you. I'm not going to expect them to wrestle for the World Championships at WrestleMania at this point. But if they're not doing something either in a tag scenario or, say, Seth Rollins or Dean Ambrose is wrestling for the Intercontinental title, if that IC title is getting important at that point, then we got something going on.
Not in a lumberjack pay-per-view.
Yeah, not in a
match.
You gotta put them in a position
bullshit.
where they can showcase their abilities and put them on a spotlight where people can say, "Oh wow, who are these guys? Let me find out."
Maybe it'll be in a ladder match of some kind.
Well, he mentioned Raw being 3 hours. Do you think that's going to be, because I don't think fans generally like that. The ratings have generally gone down for a long time in the third hour until The Rock showed up. And then people seem to be, it's too much. 3 hours is too much every week. Do you think that it's overkill?
I don't think so. I just don't think they're utilizing it fully. They're doing the same thing they did with 2 hours, just expanding it more. I thought when they got 3 hours, cool, they're going to get more wrestling on it. They're going to have a couple more matches. It'll be great. The first time they did it, I swear to God, it was like an hour and a half before I saw the first legit match. Besides, like, I'm not talking a squash, so I'm not talking some 20-minute long promo. Like, the first match was like after the first hour. They're getting better with it, but they're not doing enough. They need to put more guys on the show.
I think to get better strides. Because, I mean, I agree. The first show, I felt like it was just long and taking its time to get to its point. But finally, I think they're getting a better cadence. Like, obviously, they're going to open every show with that 20-minute promo. They haven't gotten out of that, and they never will. Once in a while, once in a blue moon, they'll open up with an Intercontinental title match or a tag team title match, which is something they need to do more often. If they would at least pull a few ideas from TNA and open up with a hot opener more often than not, they probably would at least start off with a bang in the ratings instead of having this laborious 15-minute promo. Whether you like Punk or whether you like Paul Heyman or whether you like Cena or whoever, it's still the same thing we've been watching for the last 12, 13, 14 years.
Well, you mentioned TNA, and two of the other stories in pro wrestling were a really change up of management. In the Ring of Honor world, Jim Cornette got demoted and then released, and then in TNA, we had Vince Russo leaving the creative team and Bruce Pritchard really taking his place, and I think the change was immediate over the summer because we talked about TNA on this show. You could definitely see improvement, but I think it's been pretty lacking in the last couple months. I'm not saying I've given up on it completely, but the major storyline that people complain about is Aces and Eights. I don't think that's necessarily the biggest problem that they have right now, but it just seems like they're taking too long almost to get to the point. How do you think TNA is right now? Because this past year, as much as we may have liked it, it was the lowest average TV rating in, 6 years?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the good writing may not be reflecting in the viewership. So how do you think it is right now?
It's definitely a lot better than it was last year, but I still don't like the Aces and Eights. It's too drawn out. I think pretty much everybody's withdrawn from it. Everybody's like, it's whatever. I also think they could do better with their world title situation.
Or any title situation, really.
That too, but having Jeff Hardy, they haven't really done much with him. He's not in any, Jeff Hardy's feuding with this guy. They're not really showcasing the world heavyweight title the way that they should be.
Jeff Hardy, unfortunately, lacks a dynamic. He may have a lot of kids and fans and girls that like to come to shows and scream his name left and right, But outside of that, he may be the charismatic enigma and whatever the hell he calls himself, but he doesn't really translate to a whole lot of other people. That's the biggest problem with him. I don't see him as a dynamic character to pull in more people to watch him outside of the bubble that he's already used to.
You don't see Jeff Hardy coming out at the beginning of TNA cutting a promo, oh, I'm going to be wrestling this person.
It's all in his head. We don't have to.
Exactly.
But it sucks because he has the company on his back and you want to see him try to push them forward, but you don't see anything coming out of it. It's whatever they put him in and he'll go along and do whatever. But the world title pretty much means nothing around his waist.
I don't know. I mean, he did win the world title in the main event of Bound for Glory, and that to me would be event of the year because WrestleMania was good this year. It was better than it has been in years past, sure, but I think Bound for Glory from top to bottom, it wasn't perfect, but it was very enjoyable. Had 2 match of the year candidates, so to speak, and I think his comeback story, while it may not be for everybody, I think it was good for his fans, and it was a nice cap off to his return and ascension, so to speak. And it was a really good match, too. So what do you think was event of the year? Bound for Glory or something else?
It was Bound for Glory. I liked it. I loved the hardcore match between James Storm and Bobby Roode. Thought it was cool. Told a great story. I liked that they unmasked Devon.
That was great.
When he pulled it off, my immediate thought was, it was me, bully! It was me all along! Hardy winning the title was actually pretty cool, too. Even though I was rooting for Aries, it was still pretty good.
Extreme Rules 2012.
Definitely agreed.
That main event with Brock and Cena was crazy, even though Brock should have been over, but that the whole main event, the whole sequence of the match, it didn't feel like a regular wrestling match. It felt like a fight.
That was a shit kicking. That's
yes,
what that was.
Yes,
man.
And he cut him open right in the beginning with elbows and everything, and also the street fight with Punk and Jericho. I think that was a very underrated match, and the 2 out of 3 falls with Sheamus and Bryan, because they only got 18 seconds the month before WrestleMania, so now they were able to do everything that they wanted.
And that event overall felt more like WrestleMania in a way than WrestleMania did, just bell to bell.
If it wasn't for TLC at the end of the year, I would have said Extreme Rules also. But I felt TLC from top to bottom, from the opener all the way to the main event. The crowd made the show between the TLC matches, between the ladder match with Ziggler and Cena. Ziggler and Cena had a great match. The TLC was rocking the whole time. Antonio Cesaro's match was really good. The whole card, even the on-the-spot build-up for the 6-man tag, 3MB, WO's team, that pay-per-view was probably the best one I saw all year.
And the main event with the Shield, people were talking about how great that match was, but you mentioned Cena and Lesnar. That to me was not even match of the year for WWE, like match of the decade. Like that was so amazing and different than anything they had done in maybe forever, in a really long time. That really stands out to me as match of the year for WWE. Nothing could touch that. So do you agree or do you think different?
I really enjoyed that match. We watched that match together. We all thought it was crazy when we saw it, but psychology-wise, I just thought that Triple H and Undertaker from WrestleMania, that's the story they told one of the most amazing stories in the ring that you could ever tell, especially with Shawn Michaels as the referee. Shawn Michaels could be Mr. WrestleMania in a referee role. That tells you something.
On the same line of a hardcore match, it told a great story. I'm going to go with James Storm and Bobby Roode. I thought it was a great blow-off to the feud, and I love the ending when he hit him over the head with a bottle and then kind of held him up as if saying, goodbye, dude. This is it. Super kick. I thought it was a great ending, great match, told a great story. The best match of the best pay-per-view.
Punk and Bryan from Over the Limit. As a purist wrestling match, that one, I think, took the cake for the entire year.
Wrestler of the year. I'm sure a lot of people say CM Punk. Do you agree?
I disagree. I got to go with Daniel Bryan, the most consistent and entertaining character, personality, whatever, on wrestling today.
What people have been saying a lot is he's done more with less than anybody.
Oh, yeah. If you look at how he started the year as champion, he made Santino Marella look like he could take the world title from an Elimination Chamber. And coming off the 18-second loss at WrestleMania.
And he got that over.
He got that over with the yes and with the AJ Lee, now Team Hell No, the beard, everything he's doing turned into gold.
What's great about that and what you said about him getting lesser opponents over, he's always done that. He did it in Ring of Honor, and people who knew him from Ring of Honor, they knew how much charisma he really had. So I'm glad that they were able to see that and it's able to translate onto a bigger stage.
Austin Aries. He was kind of introduced to the world at Destination X, and he had a great match with Rude, and he had a great match with Hardy, great promos, great matches.
With everybody.
Yeah, I think he's done the best.
And that whole pay-per-view was built around Aries. Yeah. Like everything.
The whole video we were watching before Destination X was really like, wow, if I didn't know who Austin Aries was, I'd think this guy's pretty badass.
And it really was his moment. He's had great chemistry with a lot of people, especially Rude, even out of the ring, as we saw this past week.
That was fun.
Right, but when he won confetti and he didn't lose it the next day, he had a good title run. They made Austin Aries, and he still has potential to win it back. So definitely, I think Aries Wrestler of the Year.
Dolph Ziggler. I thought the guy from the beginning of the year.
Finally, right?
He wrestled at Royal Rumble against Punk. Had a good match there. From that point forth, he's had a consistently good match with every single person you put him in the ring with, whether it's Jericho, 2 nights back-to-back from SummerSlam to Raw, wrestling Kofi Kingston back in September, Cena's match with him to cap off the end of the year. The guy has a tremendous year, and I expect him to be world champion at some point this
Money in
year.
the bank.
Yep.
We'll see what happens in 2013, but we mentioned Ring of Honor, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Ring of Honor, ROH, coming up next on Wrestling Roundtable.
Everything we say,
Recording.
What about like 30 minutes?
Huh?
What about 15 minutes?
I think match of the year 2013 is going to be Eric and Ring of Honor in a conversation on camera.
Well, by the way, the NWO
I'm gonna put faith in Dolph Ziggler. Like 2 years ago.
We're going to see if we get a little gem here, folks, here on the hard cam. You know, you never know what someone's going to say. You know what? Even if we don't get a little gem, we'll tell Eric that he's the man. He's on the hard cam, being recorded. Eric should know he's the man.
It's not recording, is it?
It is, but I'm going to pause it.
Please pause.
Okay. Even though he's the man, still the man. All right, we're talking about Sharpies and we're off.
Once she like watches his shit.